Sophia uncovers a shocking betrayal when her stepfather sells their family cabin without her consent. Secrets, lies, and a fight for what's hers unfold in this gripping journey of resilience and justice. Another long day had passed, and I could feel my body utterly drained. The fading light of late afternoon barely touched the countryside, where I had been working for hours. I had been volunteering in this rural village, doing everything I could to help the people here. And despite the serene surroundings, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. Everything here moved slowly, peacefully even, but my mind was racing, as it often did after long days spent trying to make a difference. As I sat in the small makeshift office, resting my tired body on the creaky chair, I stared out of the window at the shifting branches of the trees outside. I was exhausted, and for once I just wanted to do nothing. Let the world pass by as I took a breather. But my peace was shattered when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated for a moment before reaching for it. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. David. I didn't know why his name always made my stomach churn. Maybe it was because after all these years I still didn't fully trust him. He wasn't a bad guy, but there was always something off about him. Something about the way he could charm everyone and worm his way into your life, only to turn around and disappoint you. I had learned to keep my distance, but every time he called, the old familiar knot in my stomach would return. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, almost willing it to stop ringing. But curiosity, or maybe a tiny bit of hope, made me swipe the answer button. Hello. My voice was calm, though I could feel a bit of unease slipping in. Sophia, hey. David's voice came through the line, too cheerful as always. Just thought I'd give you a heads up about something. My heartbeat quickened. What's up? I asked, trying to keep the tension from seeping into my voice. I sold the cabin, he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Just wanted to let you know. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. What? I couldn't even process it. You sold it? Yeah, David said casually, his tone light. It was time. It's for the best, really. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine, Sophia. I felt my pulse spike. That's impossible, I muttered under my breath. You can't just sell it without asking me. That cabin isn't yours to sell. David chuckled lightly. It's just a cabin, sophomore. And you haven't been there in ages. It was just sitting there, wasting away. I needed to settle some debts, and well, this was the easiest way. I could feel the anger bubbling up in me, pushing my words out before I could stop myself. That cabin was my mom's, and then it became mine. You have no right to sell it without even talking to me about it. David's tone turned dismissive, almost mocking. Relax, Sophia. It's all handled. I sold it to clear up some of my debts. You'll thank me for it later. Trust me, it's the best thing. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't sure if I was angrier at him or at myself for being so naive, thinking that somehow he would respect the one thing my mother and I held dear. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. You don't get it, David. That cabin means something. It's not just a thing to sell. It's part of me, part of my memories with my mom. You had no right to do this. David's voice didn't waver. You'll get over it. Stop making a big deal out of nothing. That's it. I'm done, I snapped. You're not going to keep running over me like this, David. I ended the call abruptly, my anger a mix of frustration and betrayal. How dare he think he could just take something that wasn't his to take? I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as a mix of emotions stormed through me. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. That cabin was where I had spent countless summers with my mom. The place I went to when I needed peace, when I needed to remember the good times. And now, in a single phone call, David had ripped that away from me. I took a deep breath and walked over to the small table where I had left my things. I needed to think. I needed a plan. The first thing I did was call Emma, my best friend and co-owner of the cabin. I knew she would understand the depth of this. Hey, Soph, Emma answered, her voice always cheerful, but there was a note of concern when she heard my tone. Emma, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. David sold the cabin. Without telling me. Without asking me. There was a long pause on the other end. Wait, what? He sold it? That's insane. He can't do that. I know, I said, pacing back and forth in the small room. I don't know what he was thinking. He sold it to pay off his gambling debts and now it's gone. Just like that. Emma was quiet for a moment, likely processing what I had just said. This is beyond messed up, sophomore. We have a legal agreement. He can't just sell it like that without both our signatures. He doesn't have the right to do that. I let out a long breath. I know. But he's acting like it's no big deal. Like I'm supposed to just accept it. And I can't. I won't. I paused, thinking for a moment. Emma, I need your help. I need to figure out what we can do. This isn't over. You're right, she said firmly. We'll fix this. I'll get the documents and check everything. Don't worry. We'll take care of it together. I hung up the phone, a sense of determination slowly replacing the anger that had flared up earlier. This wasn't just about the cabin. It was about standing up for myself and reclaiming control over something that mattered deeply to me. I wasn't going to let David get away with this. Not this time. I couldn't sit still. After I hung up with David, the anger, frustration, and disbelief coursed through me like a torrent. I paced the small room, my mind racing. I needed to do something, anything to fix this. The cabin wasn't just a property. It was a piece of my heart, a piece of my mother's legacy. And David had just sold it like it was nothing. Without a second thought, I knew I couldn't let this slide. I immediately called Emma. I could feel my hands shaking as I dialed her number. She was the only person who would understand what I was going through right now. Sophia? What happened? She answered, her voice soft but filled with concern. David sold the cabin, I blurted out, my voice tight with anger. He sold it without asking me. Without even telling me. I just found out today. What? She exclaimed, disbelief clear in her tone. That's insane. He can't do that, Sophia. We have a legal agreement. You both signed it. He can't sell it without your consent. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as Emma spoke the words I needed to hear. I know, I replied, trying to steady myself. But he's acting like it's no big deal, like I'm supposed to be fine with it. He's even saying it was for the best, to pay off his gambling debts. Well, he's wrong, Emma said firmly. He's breaking the law, Sophia. And you know we have every right to stop him. Let's get the legal documents and make sure everything's in order. We'll take care of it. The weight in my chest lightened just a little as Emma's words gave me the strength to keep moving forward. Thanks, Emma. I'm going back to the cabin now. I need to sort through some things, get everything together. I'll let you know what I find. I hung up the phone, the decision made. I needed to confront this head-on. If David thought he could get away with selling my home, without my consent no less, he was gravely mistaken. The drive back to the cabin felt endless. Each mile stretched on, the thoughts swirling in my head only growing louder with each passing second. How could David have done this? He'd never shown any respect for the place, but I never thought he'd go this far. It wasn't just a house. It was where my mom had lived, where she'd worked so hard to build a home for us. It was where she'd passed away, leaving me with nothing but memories, and this cabin. Now David had taken that from me too. When I arrived, the familiar sight of the cabin should have brought me some comfort, but all I felt was anger. The door creaked open and I stepped inside, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. The place looked the same, dusty from the lack of visitors but still standing strong just as I remembered. My eyes moved across the room, landing on the worn floorboards that had supported my mother's steps, my steps for years. I moved through the house, cleaning up as I went. As I was sweeping near the corner of the living room, my eyes caught something unusual. A small box tucked away under the floorboards, nearly hidden in the shadows. It wasn't much bigger than a shoebox, old and weathered, but there was something about it that stopped me in my tracks. A feeling I couldn't ignore. I knelt down and pulled the box from its hiding place, the dust settling around me as I gently lifted it. My fingers traced the rough edges of the box before I carefully opened it. Inside, I found a collection of papers, old letters yellowing with age, and a small envelope tucked underneath. The first letter I pulled out was written in my mother's handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I realized these were her things. She had hidden them away in this box, and now it seemed like the past was coming back to haunt me. I carefully unfolded the letter and read the words written in my mother's familiar, flowing script. Sophia, my dear daughter, if you ever find this letter, then I am no longer around to explain. I've done something that may seem difficult for you to understand, but I hope you'll forgive me. Your father, David, has never been the man he appears to be. And I fear that if I leave it too late, you will lose what you love most. The cabin, our home, must be protected. I've made provisions. You must trust me, and one day, you'll understand why I've done this. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What was she talking about? I'd never seen this letter before. The mention of David, the mention of the cabin, it all felt like a warning. But the most shocking part came when I pulled out the next piece of paper. It was a legal document, an official-looking will, with my mother's signature and another name at the bottom. Ethan Daniels. Ethan Daniels? The name was unfamiliar, and yet something about it struck me like a bolt of lightning. I stared at the document in disbelief. According to this, Ethan Daniels was listed as a co-owner of the cabin, along with my mother. But more importantly, he held a share that I had never been told about. I had no idea who this person was, but he had rights to the cabin, rights that I had never been made aware of. I felt dizzy. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet as the implications of this discovery hit me. There was another person, another relative of David's, who had a claim to the cabin. It wasn't just me and Emma. It was Ethan Daniels too. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Who was this person? Why hadn't my mother ever mentioned him? And why was David hiding all of this from me? The cabin, my mother's legacy, had become more complicated than I could have ever imagined. And now I had no choice but to find out who Ethan Daniels was, and what he wanted. The weight of the discovery hit me harder than I expected. I had thought David's betrayal was bad enough, but now I knew there was more, so much more. As I sat on the worn armchair by the fireplace, the reality of what I just uncovered seemed to settle around me like a heavy, suffocating fog. I could feel my hands trembling as I held the papers, the will, and the legal documents. The name Ethan Daniels echoed in my mind over and over. Who was this person? And why hadn't I known about him before? It didn't make sense. My mother had always been so protective of me. She had kept so many things hidden, but never anything that felt this important. The cabin had been ours, mine and my mom's, a sacred space where she had poured her love, her memories, and her efforts. How could she have shared ownership with someone I'd never even heard of? And why didn't she tell me about it? My breath caught in my chest as the anger flared up again. This wasn't just about David. This was about someone else, someone I'd never even met. Someone tied to the very family that had betrayed me. It was as if the universe was conspiring to take the one thing that I had left. The pain in my chest seemed to grow with every thought, but alongside it came a surge of determination. I stood up abruptly, the paper still clutched in my hands. I wasn't going to let this happen. I wasn't going to lose the cabin, not without a fight. My mother's wishes, whatever they were, had to be honored. The cabin was my heritage, my home, my connection to her. I wouldn't let anyone, least of all David and this Ethan Daniels, take it from me. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. I needed help. I needed someone who could guide me through this legal mess. Someone who could help me navigate the labyrinth of ownership, inheritance, and betrayal. I called the lawyer I had worked with in the past, the one who had helped me sort out a few smaller matters. I didn't know if he could help with something this complex, but I had no other options. After a few rings, he picked up. Sophia? What's going on? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need your help. David sold the cabin that my mom and I own together. But there's more. There's a legal document, and it turns out another person, someone I've never heard of, has a claim to it. His name is Ethan Daniels. He's a relative of David's. The lawyer was silent for a moment. This is complicated, he said carefully. Do you have the documents? Send them to me and I'll take a look. We'll figure this out. Thank you, I replied, the relief in my voice barely masking the fear and anger still boiling beneath the surface. I'll send everything to you now. I spent the next hour scanning and emailing the documents to my lawyer, every click of the mouse feeling like a small step toward taking back control. But even as I sent the files, I knew that the real work was just beginning. I had to know who Ethan Daniels was. I had to understand the full extent of what my mother had done, or perhaps what she hadn't done. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of urgency pressing down on me. I couldn't let this drag on. I had to act fast. While I waited for the lawyer's response, I began my own investigation into Ethan Daniels. My mind raced as I thought of the possibilities. A family member of David's? Was he a cousin, an uncle, someone I'd never even met? Or was he just some random person David had pulled into this mess? I started by searching the name online. There was nothing unusual at first, just a few mentions in local records, mostly family-related and fairly ordinary. But as I dug deeper, I found a mention of an Ethan Daniels in connection with a real estate firm. The company specialized in property management and land deals. It was the last thing I expected, and it didn't make sense. Why was he involved in real estate? And why had David never mentioned him? I called the firm hoping to get some answers. After a few minutes on hold, I was transferred to someone who might know more about Ethan Daniels. "Hello, how can I help you?" The voice on the other end was polite but businesslike. "I'm looking for information about Ethan Daniels," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I understand he's been involved in some property dealings with your firm." There was a brief pause. "Ah, yes. Mr. Daniels is one of our longtime partners. He's been involved in various investments. Is this related to a property matter?" I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Yes, actually. I need to understand his involvement in a piece of property, specifically a cabin in the mountains. Do you have any records that might help?" The person on the other end of the line didn't seem particularly willing to share details. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that kind of information without authorization." I felt a flash of frustration but managed to keep my cool. "I understand. But could you at least confirm that Ethan Daniels has a stake in a property that might be co-owned with someone named Sophia Daniels?" There was a long pause and then the voice softened. "I can't discuss it in detail, but I can tell you that Mr. Daniels has an interest in several properties. You should probably speak with him directly for more information." I thanked the person and hung up, feeling more confused than ever. The pieces didn't fit. Ethan Daniels was somehow connected to this real estate firm, which meant he had more than just a casual connection to the property, and more than just a simple inheritance claim. What did he want? And why hadn't David told me about him? As the day passed, my mind churned with questions. I had learned only fragments of what I needed to know. But there was one thing I was sure of now: I wasn't just up against David. I was up against an unknown player in this twisted game, someone with his own stake in the cabin and likely his own reasons for wanting it. This wasn't just a matter of reclaiming what was mine. This was a battle to protect my mother's legacy and my future. The day had come. I knew that I couldn't wait any longer. The anger still simmered within me, but more than that, there was a rising need for answers. David had crossed a line, and now it was time to face him. I drove to his house with a sense of purpose, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The cabin, my mother's legacy, had been sold without my consent, and a stranger, this Ethan Daniels, had some claim to it. I had no idea who Ethan was or what he wanted, but I knew one thing. I had to stop David from destroying the only piece of my past that I had left. The cabin was mine, and I wouldn't let him take it from me. When I arrived at his house, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. David was sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette, looking like he hadn't a care in the world. His relaxed posture contrasted with the storm that was brewing inside me. But I wasn't going to let his calm demeanor shake me this time. I walked up to him, the weight of what I was about to do hanging heavily on my shoulders. "David," I said, my voice steady but cold, "we need to talk." He looked up at me, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "Sophia," he said casually, flicking the ash from his cigarette. "I was wondering when you'd show up. What's this about? Still upset over the cabin?" "You sold it," I said flatly, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. "Without my consent. And that is illegal." David leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into that smug smile I had come to despise. "Oh, come on. It wasn't that serious. The place was just sitting there. I needed the money to clear up some of my debts, and it seemed like a quick way to handle things." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice controlled despite the rising frustration inside me. "You can't just sell a property without both owners agreeing to it. We had a legal agreement, and you violated it." David shrugged, as if dismissing everything I had just said. "The agreement doesn't matter, Sophia. I needed the money. You don't even go there anymore. It was a practical decision." "Practical?" I shot back, my voice rising. That cabin wasn't just a place to me, David. It was my mother's sanctuary, her gift to me, and you sold it like it was some old piece of junk. You have no right. David's demeanor faltered for just a second. He shifted in his chair, his eyes flickering with something like guilt, but he quickly masked it with a deep sigh. Look, I'm sorry if it upset you, but it was for the best. I had no other choice. I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. And there's more, David, I said, my eyes narrowing. I found out that you're not the only one with a claim to that cabin. There's someone else, a person named Ethan Daniels. A relative of yours, I assume. David's expression shifted immediately. He stiffened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something real in his eyes, a flicker of panic. He tried to hide it, but it was too late. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice suddenly colder. What claim does Ethan have? He has nothing to do with this. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice calm but firm. I found the documents, David. My mother's will. Ethan Daniels is a co-owner of the property. His name is on the legal papers and you knew about it. You knew about him and you never told me. Why didn't you tell me about him, huh? Why hide this from me? David opened his mouth to speak but then closed it again, as if trying to find the right words. He shifted uneasily, clearly thrown off balance. Look, Sophia, he started, his voice wavering slightly. Ethan, he's a distant relative. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think you needed to know about him. I thought it was a small matter. A small matter? I snapped. You thought you could just leave him out of it? You think you can do whatever you want with the cabin because you've been making all the decisions? Well, I'm not letting you get away with this. David ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around as he searched for something to say. The cocky attitude was starting to slip away. Sophia, you have to understand, I didn't want to drag you into this. I was trying to fix things. I thought selling the cabin would solve everything. But it didn't, I countered. It just made everything worse. You never cared about that cabin, about my mom, or about me. You only cared about yourself. And now I'm going to make sure you can't just walk away from this. David stood up slowly, looking uneasy now. He dropped the cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his boot. This is bigger than you think, he muttered. Ethan's involved now, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I stepped closer, my gaze unwavering. Don't underestimate me, David. I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine, and that includes the cabin. You can't bully me into letting this slide. Not this time. David hesitated, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to gauge how serious I was. His smug smile was gone now, replaced by a look of confusion and frustration. You really think you can stop me? He asked, his voice a little hoarse. I didn't flinch. I know I can. And I will. He let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand over his face. You've always been stubborn, Sophia. Fine. Do whatever you want. But don't say I didn't warn you. This won't be as easy as you think. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I had made my stand and I knew now that I wasn't backing down. David had underestimated me. And now he was going to find out just how far I was willing to go to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The confrontation with David had left me feeling both empowered and more determined than ever. He hadn't expected me to fight back, but now that I had, I could see the cracks in his calm facade. He had always thought he could control the situation, bend things in his favor. But what he didn't realize was that I was no longer the naive young woman who had let him walk all over me for years. I was stronger now, and I wasn't going to let him take away my home. As I sat in the small office, I spread out all the documents I had gathered, the will, the co-ownership agreement, and the proof of David's illegal sale of the cabin. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but there was still much to do. I couldn't let the situation linger. Every day that passed felt like one more day David had a chance to solidify his hold on something that wasn't his to take. I had already contacted my lawyer, and now I was ready to take the next step. The law was on my side, but I needed to ensure that David couldn't keep pushing me around. I wasn't just fighting for the cabin. I was fighting for what I had left of my mother, for the memories and the love she had poured into this place. I met with the lawyer later that afternoon, hoping to clarify my legal options. His office was small but well kept, and the smell of coffee lingered in the air as he greeted me. His calm demeanor made me feel a little more at ease, but underneath it all, I could still feel the storm brewing. "Sophia, I've gone over the documents you sent me," he said as we sat down. "The legal agreement between you and David is clear. He had no right to sell the cabin without your consent. However, the addition of Ethan Daniels complicates things." I nodded, my frustration rising again. "I don't understand it. How could David have kept this from me? Why didn't he tell me about Ethan?" The lawyer looked over his notes before answering. "From a legal standpoint, David could be in serious trouble for fraud. But the involvement of Ethan means there could be an inheritance issue here. We need to dig deeper into who Ethan is, what role he plays, and why your mother kept this part of the ownership hidden." "That's exactly what I need," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "I want to take action. I want him to understand that this isn't just about the cabin. It's about me, my mother's legacy, and my rights." The lawyer leaned back in his chair. "We can send a cease and desist letter to David first, notifying him that we're aware of the illegal sale and demanding that he reverse the transaction immediately. We can also initiate a formal investigation into the fraud, involving the police. But I need you to be ready. This could get messy, especially if Ethan is involved. We may have to go to court if David refuses to comply." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The thought of dragging this through the courts was daunting, but it was the only way to ensure that David couldn't get away with this. "I'm ready," I said firmly, my decision clear. "I'm not going to let David walk away from this unscathed." The lawyer gave me a reassuring nod. "All right. I'll draft the letter, and we'll have it sent to him as soon as possible. I'll also reach out to law enforcement to begin the investigation." The next morning, I drafted the letter to David. It was brief but firm, outlining the violation of the co-ownership agreement and demanding that he retract the sale of the cabin immediately. I made it clear that if he didn't comply, I would be taking legal action, including involving the police for the fraudulent transaction. As I stared at the letter, I could feel the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about a piece of property. This was about reclaiming my life, my past, and the one thing that still connected me to my mother. I couldn't let David take that from me. Not now, not ever. Once the letter was signed, I had it delivered to David's house, my heart racing with each step. This was it, the first move in what would likely be a long and difficult battle. But I was ready. I knew that I couldn't afford to back down. Later that afternoon, I called the police to report the fraud. I explained the situation, detailing how David had sold the cabin without my knowledge or consent, and how I had discovered the documents that showed Ethan Daniels' involvement. The officer who took my call was calm and professional, but I could sense the seriousness in his voice. "We'll begin looking into it right away," he assured me. "It sounds like a clear case of fraud. We'll contact you soon for further details." As I waited for a response from both David and the police, I spent the next few days looking into Ethan Daniels. I contacted a few people who might know him, including the real estate firm where he worked. What I learned only added to my unease. Ethan wasn't just some distant relative. He was someone who had been deeply involved in real estate transactions for years, and he was connected to David in ways I still didn't fully understand. I was getting closer to the truth, and with each step, I could feel the walls closing in around David. He had underestimated me, thinking I would let this go. But I wasn't the same person I used to be. I was stronger now, and I would fight for what was rightfully mine, no matter who stood in my way. It had been a few days since I sent the cease and desist letter to David, and the tension in the air was thick. My phone felt like a constant reminder of everything I had to do, but it also gave me some hope. I had been expecting David to respond quickly, either with anger or a desperate attempt to justify his actions, but nothing came. The silence felt unnerving, as though he was plotting his next move, trying to find a way out of the mess he had created. But I wasn't about to give him that opportunity. I spent the next several days obsessively digging into every detail I could find about the sale of the cabin and about Ethan Daniels. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. David hadn't just violated our agreement with me and Emma. He had been involved in a much larger scheme than I had imagined. My phone buzzed with an email from the real estate agent I had contacted, and my heart skipped a beat. The message was brief, but its contents were enough to send a chill down my spine. Sophia, I've reviewed the records. It appears that the sale of your cabin was processed without proper consent from both co-owners, which makes the transaction illegal. The buyer was unaware of your ownership, and I was not informed of any co-ownership agreement when the transaction took place. Please contact me if you need further details. Best regards, Sarah Mitchell. I couldn't believe it. David had gone behind both my back and Emma's to sell the cabin, and he had done so in a way that hid the truth from the buyer. He hadn't just violated the agreement with us, he had committed outright fraud. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. He had thought he could get away with it, thinking that I wouldn't find out or that I wouldn't fight back. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not anymore. I immediately called Emma. Emma, you're not going to believe this, I said, my voice shaky with a mix of rage and triumph. David didn't just sell the cabin to anyone. He sold it illegally. I got the confirmation from the real estate agent. The buyer had no idea about our co-ownership. And it gets worse, David didn't notify anyone about this. He kept it all a secret. Emma's voice cracked with disbelief. That man is unbelievable. How could he think he could get away with something like this? I don't know, I said, pacing back and forth, trying to wrap my mind around it. But we need to act fast. The sale is invalid, but the longer this drags on, the more complicated it's going to get. We need to get this in front of a judge, Emma replied with determination. We'll fight this, Sophia. He can't just sell what isn't his. I took a deep breath, letting her words ground me. I'm not backing down. But first I need to know everything. Who else was involved? Who else knew about this? I need to know the full extent of David's deception. Over the next few days I continued my investigation, determined to piece together every part of David's treacherous plan. I called every contact I could, reaching out to people who might have information. The deeper I dug, the more layers I uncovered. One afternoon, I received a call from the same real estate agent, Sarah Mitchell. She was more forthcoming this time, likely after realizing the gravity of the situation. Sophia, I've got some additional information that may help. When David sold the cabin, the buyer was under the impression that the sale was legitimate. But David handled everything himself, without proper documentation or signatures from you or Emma. I flagged the transaction because of irregularities, but it looks like David was trying to push it through quickly, possibly to avoid scrutiny. This was bigger than I had thought. David had gone to great lengths to hide the illegal nature of the sale, and worse, he had deceived both the buyer and Ethan Daniels, the supposed co-owner. Is there any chance the buyer could still be involved in this? I asked, my mind racing with new possibilities. Sarah hesitated before answering. I don't think so. They were unaware of the co-ownership agreement, and I'm sure they'll back out once they realize the truth. But this has to be dealt with immediately, or it could get even messier. I felt a surge of frustration. David has really outdone himself this time. With everything I had uncovered, I knew it was time to act. Emma and I met the next day to go over everything we had learned. We were both more determined than ever to take action. David had not only sold the cabin behind our backs, but he had also lied to the buyer and manipulated the situation in his favor. This was no longer just about the cabin. It was about ensuring that David was held accountable for his actions. We need to escalate this, Emma said, looking through the documents I had gathered. This isn't just a violation of trust. It's fraud. He can't keep getting away with this. I nodded in agreement. I'm going to contact the authorities again. We can't just let David think he can pull the wool over our eyes. I've got all the evidence I need, and I'm not backing down. As we finalized our plan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. For the first time since I found out about David's actions, I felt like I was taking back control. This wasn't just about legalities or ownership. It was about standing up to someone who had repeatedly taken advantage of me. This was my home, my legacy, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not David, destroy it. With the letter sent to the authorities and my lawyer's involvement, I felt a surge of momentum. It wasn't just about reclaiming a piece of property anymore. It was about showing David that I wouldn't let him trample over me again. The battle was far from over, but I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. The phone rang, cutting through the heavy silence of the room. I stared at it for a few moments, feeling the weight of the decision in my chest. It was David calling once again. I had expected him to lay low, to try to avoid me after everything that had happened, but it seemed he wasn't done. I could feel the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. The investigation was moving forward, but there was one thing I still hadn't faced. The conversation with David. It was time to confront him one last time. I answered the phone, my voice cold. "What do you want, David?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if he was gathering his thoughts. "Sophia," he began, his tone softer than usual, almost reluctant. "I think it's time we talk about this. Really talk about it." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean, David?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger rising within me. "There's nothing left to say. You sold the cabin without my consent. You broke the law. You're going to pay for it." He sighed heavily. "Look, I know you're upset, but there's more to this than you think. I've been trying to protect you in my own way. I know it might not make sense, but everything I've done to try to keep you safe." "Safe?" I repeated incredulously. "You've been lying to me, hiding things from me, and now you expect me to believe that you were protecting me?" There was a long silence before David spoke again. "I didn't want to tell you this," he said, his voice quieter now, almost as if he were ashamed. "But your mother, she made some decisions before she passed. She sold part of the cabin to me, and she never told you about it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mother had sold part of the cabin to David? How could she have done that without telling me? Without me even knowing? A sense of dread flooded over me, and I felt the room grow colder. "What do you mean she sold it to you?" I managed to choke out. David hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Your mother knew what was coming. She knew that after she passed, you'd be caught up in all the financial mess. She knew it would be hard for you to keep the cabin on your own. So she sold part of it to me and we made a deal. She didn't want you to be burdened with the property when it became too much. She didn't want you to face any more financial struggles than you already had." I stood there, numb. The shock and disbelief were overwhelming. My mother, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, had kept this from me. She had made a decision behind my back, thinking she was protecting me, but in the process she had betrayed me. I had never even known about it. Not a word. All these years I had thought I was the sole owner of the cabin, the last piece of her that remained after her death. But now it felt like everything I knew about her, about the cabin, had been turned upside down. David continued, oblivious to the storm of emotions churning inside me. "I didn't want you to know. I thought it would be easier for you, you know? But now, with everything going on, I think you deserve to know the truth. Your mother's decision, her choice to sell part of the cabin to me, it was made so you wouldn't be left with the burden of it all. She didn't want you to struggle. She wanted to protect you, Sophia. She loved you too much to let you face that alone." I felt my legs weaken, and I stumbled backward, sinking onto the couch. My heart was pounding in my chest. The revelation hit me like a wave crashing over me, leaving me gasping for air. How could she have kept something so important from me? How could she have made such a huge decision about our home without even giving me the chance to understand? Why didn't she tell me? I whispered, more to myself than to David. Why couldn't she just tell me the truth? David paused, his voice softer now. "I think she was trying to protect you from the stress, from the pain of knowing that the cabin might slip through your fingers. She didn't want to burden you with that. But I'm sorry, Sophia. I never meant for you to find out like this." The weight of his words crushed me. I felt like everything I had built my world around, the cabin, my memories with my mom, had just been shattered. My mother had been trying to protect me, but in doing so, she had kept a secret that would change everything. I had thought that the cabin was mine, that it was my connection to her, but now I realized it was a shared ownership. A shared ownership I never knew about. I could feel the tears welling up, but I held them back. I wasn't going to let David see me break down. I couldn't. "So you've been hiding this from me all along?" I asked, my voice trembling with hurt. "And now you expect me to just accept it?" David's voice faltered, a hint of guilt creeping in. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you, Sophia. I thought I was doing the right thing by taking care of everything." I couldn't speak for a moment. The pain in my chest was suffocating, but there was something else too: anger. I was angry at David for lying to me, for selling the cabin, for not telling me the truth. But I was also angry at my mother. She had done what she thought was right, but she had kept me in the dark. The very thing that had been my sanctuary, the last memory of her, had now been tainted by betrayal. I took a deep breath and stood up. "You don't get it, David," I said, my voice firm despite the overwhelming pain. "You thought you were protecting me, but you've just made everything worse. I won't let you take the cabin, and I won't let you keep me in the dark anymore." David's expression shifted, and for the first time I saw him hesitate. He wasn't so confident now. He had underestimated me, and he was starting to realize it. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook. Not now. Not after everything he had done. "You've made a mistake, David," I said coldly. "And now you'll pay the price for it." The battle had been long, exhausting, and full of moments when I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. But now, as I stood at the threshold of the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet triumph. Everything I had fought for, every sleepless night, every phone call, every ounce of energy I had poured into this had led me here. To this moment. To victory. It hadn't been easy. The legal fight had dragged on for months, and at times I wasn't sure if I could keep up. David had tried every trick in the book, using his connections, his charm, and his lies to worm his way out of it. But in the end, the truth came out. The fraud, the deception, and the hidden ownership were all exposed. Thanks to Emma's support and my own determination, we had made sure that the law held David accountable for what he had done. Even Ethan Daniels, the mysterious co-owner of the cabin, had been revealed for what he was: a mere pawn in David's game. It turned out that Ethan had no real claim to the property. My mother had never sold part of the cabin to him as David had claimed. Instead, David had fabricated the story in a desperate attempt to cover up his own lies. The legal battle, although hard-fought, had resulted in our favor. The cabin was finally and fully mine again. I couldn't help but smile to myself. As the gavel came down, signaling the end of the legal proceedings, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The cabin was mine, but more importantly, I had learned something about myself through all of this. I had learned to stand my ground, to fight for what was rightfully mine, even when it seemed like the world was against me. I had discovered a strength inside me that I hadn't known existed, and now I was free. After the legal victory, I drove back to the cabin, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The familiar sight of the old house welcomed me as I approached. It was almost as if the cabin was waiting for me, as if it knew that I had fought so hard to protect it. I parked in front, stepping out of the car and letting the cool mountain air fill my lungs. The cabin stood there unchanged, but somehow more meaningful than it had ever been. It was a symbol now, not just of the place where my mother had lived and died, but of my journey, my growth, my strength. I walked up the porch steps slowly, taking in every detail: the creaky wood, the weathered beams, the quiet peace that seemed to settle over the place. This had been my sanctuary when everything else in my life felt out of control. And now, after everything that had happened, it still was. Standing on the porch, I let out a long, slow breath, letting the weight of the past few months slip away. I had done it. I had fought back. I had won. And more than that, I had learned to believe in myself. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this battle months ago. I had grown stronger, more resilient, more confident. And that, more than anything else, was what this victory had given me. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the peace that had eluded me for so long. It wasn't just the cabin that I had won back. It was my sense of self. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even David, take that from me again. Later that evening, Emma came over to celebrate. We sat on the porch, the air cool and crisp as the sun began to set behind the mountains. The quiet of the surroundings wrapped around us like a soft blanket, and for the first time in a long while I felt at peace. "You did it, Sophia," Emma said, raising her glass in a toast. "You really did it. And I'm so proud of you." I smiled, the weight of the past months finally beginning to lift from my shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma," I replied. "You've been my rock through all of this. I'm not sure I would have made it without your support." She grinned and clinked her glass against mine. "We did it together. That's what friends are for." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us soaking in the beauty of the evening. The cabin had been a battleground for so long, a place of pain and loss, but now it felt like a symbol of everything I had fought for. My independence, my strength, and my future. "So," Emma said, breaking the silence, "what's next for you, Sophia? Now that it's all over?" I took a deep breath, looking out at the mountains. "I don't know yet," I said, my voice filled with a quiet confidence. "But whatever it is, I'm going to do it on my terms." She smiled, clearly proud of me. "I have no doubt about that." The sun had set, and the stars began to twinkle in the sky. We sat there for a long time, talking about everything and nothing, enjoying the simple peace that came with knowing we had one. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home. Not just in the cabin, but in myself. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the woods around me, I realized something. This battle hadn't just been about a cabin. It had been about reclaiming my voice, reclaiming my right to make decisions for myself and to protect what mattered most. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the same strength and determination that had carried me through this fight. The cabin was mine, but more importantly, I was mine. And nothing could ever take that away from me again.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.